NABU, that's Nature and Biodiversity Conservation Union in the Africa Regional Office. So I would like to warmly welcome all of you for this this afternoon celebration on Earth Day. And for us in Africa, we all know that every day is Earth Day, but there is some symbolism with Earth Day that we will hear from our speakers subsequently, and we are celebrating Earth Day today. But as part of the celebration, we will also have the launch of the press statement as well as a panel discussion. So it's an exciting afternoon that becomes us. So without taking much time, let me kindly request Mr. Al-Azhar Dhaka, who represents the Consortium for Climate Change Ethiopia, our host here in Addis Ababa. Mr. Al-Azhar, please come and provide your welcoming remarks.
Good afternoon, everybody. It is very nice that we meet to celebrate Earth Day. Just today with PACJA, we are going to celebrate pre-Earth Day. CCE, Consortium for Climate Change Ethiopia, is a national designated partner of PACJA, so that we are happy to prepare this ceremony together. I hope every of you will have a good time before that. Just you know that our Earth is very important where we live, and this year theme is Earth and Plastic, so that we are avoiding plastic pollution, which is very serious. Even our ocean currently, it is polluted by the debris and plastic pollutions, which we might have find many different types of biodiversity there. So that based on that, we'll have a good discussion during this meeting and ceremony. CC is planning preparation of World Day with Benishangul Gumuz Regional State, and we are going to celebrate coming on 23rd on Tuesday. We'll go travel there, and we'll have awareness creation among with the CBOs and CSOs, including the government officials there, so that bearing this in mind, I hope everybody will understand about the pollution and conserving our biodiversity without using or polluting our environment, especially plastic pollutions. So that I wish all the participants during the remaining of the time good participation, and I hope you will enjoy it. Welcome everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Al-Azhar, and for those of our friends from across the continent, it is Ato Al-Azhar in Addis Ababa. I think you know that Ato means Mr. So next time when you talk to an Ethiopian colleague, say Ato for Mr. if you want to call them Mr. And I would also like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the presence of youth in this big event. And you know, I think one of the core agenda of PACJA is to build capacity for youth through the one and only you know, capacity building initiative that is Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice. But apart from that, you know, there are also a lot of youth programs. But today here we have youth from two big universities. One is Addis Ababa University, which is based here in Addis Ababa, as well as on the little bit on the eastern side, we have Kotabe Education University. That's also a new third generation governmental university trying to build capacity. So we have a number of students from there. But also we have staff members. We have professors from Addis Ababa University, climate modelers, artificial intelligence and machine learning experts who are actually the core coordinators for tomorrow's Africa Climate Talks, as well as we have staff members from the Kotabe Education University. So now going into the next agenda is we will hear from Dr. Masarat, who is a staff member of the Biodiversity Management Department, if I'm not wrong, Environmental Sciences. Yeah, the Environmental Sciences Department, but who is an expert on biodiversity management. And so she's going to you know, tell us a little bit about Earth Day and our views about Earth Day, and then you know you will you will start the celebrations. Yeah, Dr. Masrat, please come. Give her a big hand because you will see. This is what the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice does to the youth. It emboldens them, and it also empowers them to be the advocate for environment in Africa. Yes, Dr. Masrat.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Satish. Good afternoon, everyone. We are here today to celebrate Earth Day, and I'm happy to be part of this celebration. So as we are celebrating the Earth Day, I want to say a few points why we are celebrating Earth Day and the importance of celebrating Earth Day. So as we all know, Earth Day is celebrated annually on the 22nd of April, and is one of the significant global events to enhance awareness about environment. And Earth Day is very important, especially for enhancing awareness about the different impacts of climate change that's imposing on human and also on the environment. And also celebrating such kind of international events can be taken as a reminder. Especially it reminds the international community to know the impacts of climate change, one, and also is important to remind how the activity of individuals matters on improving the environment. So Earth Day is celebrated all over the world, like millions of people celebrate the Earth Day. And also in the celebration, they will do different activities. One thing, the ones that we are doing here is one example, and people celebrate it with like conducting workshops. It might be cleaning campaigns or awareness enhancement programs, education and outreach programs are the activities. This year, Earth Day 2024 is celebrated with the theme of plastic versus planet. So we know that the impact of plastics, million tons of plastics are produced or fabricated each year. And of these million tons, we are able to reuse or to recycle 9 to 10%. So the remaining are imposed directly to the landfills, or their destination might be to water bodies. So the water bodies, especially oceans, seas, rivers, are highly affected by plastics. And also, this plastic pollution is affecting human life. So we need to take action to replace these plastics with environmental friendly materials, or we need to replace this with biodegradable materials. Saying this, I want to say a few points about the importance of ecological sustainability and also adaptation efforts, especially its cruciality for Africa. So when we are talking about ecological sustainability, it means that people's activity should not compromise on the ability of the ecosystem to function properly, to maintain the balance, to sustain life. So ecological sustainability is crucial, especially for Africa. I can list some of the reasons why it's crucial. The first one is vulnerability to climate change. So when we are talking about vulnerability, we know that of all the continents, Africa is highly vulnerable to climate change. When we are talking about climate change, we can pick extreme weather events as an example. Let me take flood and droughts. You all know that most African nations are highly affected by these extreme weather events. And this climate change is affecting many of the environmental segments. We can take as an example agriculture. It might be fisheries, forestry, and many other segments of the environment are highly affected by climate change. Let me pick agriculture as an example. Most of African nations' economy, it relies on agriculture. For example, Ethiopian economy, it highly relies on agriculture and agricultural products. 80% of Ethiopian population depends on agriculture. Almost 50% of the GDP of the country is also relies on agriculture. But the agricultural sector is highly affected by climate change. And we are facing drought. Following drought, there is famine. We are also losing life, human life and cattle. So in order to overcome such kind of problems, we need adaptation strategies, agricultural adaptation strategies. This agricultural adaptation strategy might include the implementation of different agricultural technologies. It might be implementation of improved crop varieties, conservation activities, and many others. So ecological sustainability through the adaptation strategy is very crucial for Africa. The other one is the dependency on natural resource. So as you all know, most African nations are dependent on natural resource. Our economies or our livelihood is dependent on natural resources. And this natural resource these days, they are affected by ecological degradation or deforestation and many other environmental problems. So for the sustenance and economic development, we need to implement different adaptation strategies that will overcome the impacts of these environmental problems imposing on the natural resource. From the natural resource, I can mention other examples like biodiversity. We all know that there is massive biodiversity destruction because of climate change and also because of ecological degradations. And we know that Africa is rich in biodiversity. We have plenty of natural resources. We have unique ecosystems and also unique wildlife. These are also serving as source of income as a tourism, and also they are very important to sustain life. But because of the ecological degradation and environmental problems, there is massive loss of biodiversity, which is imposing significant problems on human lives and generally on the livelihoods. So the ecological degradation is jeopardizing the livelihood and the environment in general. For this, we need to implement or adapt ecological adaptations. These ecological adaptations, they can serve to overcome the problems that I mentioned earlier. The other one, when there is extreme weather events, the health of human livestock are affected highly. For example, when there is flood and also when there is drought, there is the incidence of or the outbreak of vector-borne disease, there is malnutrition, and also there is displacement of people. So these are some of the problems that we are facing these days because of ecological degradation and also climate change. For such kind of problems, we need solution. We need to implement different adaptation strategies. The other point is sustainable development goals. So when we are talking about sustainable development goals, out of the 17 sustainable development goals, some are very important or critical for Africa. Let me mention some of them. For example, food security, poverty alleviation, clean water, access to clean water and sanitation, climate action. They are very important and very critical for Africa because we are facing different problems because of these things. So in order to achieve these sustainable development goals, we need to adapt different adaptation strategies, and we need to achieve these sustainable development goals. If we are able to achieve these sustainable goals, we will be able to build resilient climate change. The other important point is community-based adaptation. So as I said earlier, of all the continents, Africa is highly vulnerable, and all communities are not equally affected by climate change and ecological degradation. So we need to give priority for those people who are in the front line or who are affected highly by climate change. Of these, smallholder farmers, pastoralists, and indigenous people are highly affected by climate change. So we need to integrate these people. We need to integrate indigenous knowledge in our adaptation programs and in our adaptation plans. The other one is capacity building and knowledge sharing. So we need to capacitate government, we need to capacitate institutions and individuals. If we are able to capacitate the government and individuals, we will be able to bring a solution for the environmental problems. So policy and planning, if the government is capacitated or have awareness about the environment, their decisions will be environmental friendly and environmental issue will be integrated with their policies and plans. So saying this, As African, we need to work together. We need to exchange experiences. We need to exchange knowledge and resources, and we need to work in solidarity. For that, we can bring solution for the environment that we are facing these days. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Masarat. I would not, I'll not be able to do justice if I am trying to summarize what you have mentioned, but thank you for those inspiring words. And I think for those of you who still may not be fully aware of, the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice, I always wondered, yes, it's okay if you may build the capacity for an environmental advocate or an environmental diplomat, but at the same time, Nairobi Summer School, it also builds capacity for those environmental defenders, the grassroots, the activists, and as well as the researchers. Yeah, so I think, she's an embodiment of what the Nairobi Summer School can do and how it can build the capacity. So let's give a big hand once more to Dr. Masarat. So I would also like to acknowledge the presence of the media, national media here. I know that, Sunday, Mr. David and all his colleagues, I thank you for being here. I think that's also a testimony to the immense, interest that you have towards environmental sustainability. I would also like to acknowledge the presence of Ministry of Foreign Affairs officials. Two of them just entered. I saw them there, and thank you for coming. And so now, sorry. Yeah, I would also like to recognize the presence of the one and only Dr. Mithika amongst us, one of the foremost environmental leaders, global environmental leaders, and who is carrying the African flag high and who speaks truth to the power. And that's a very tough thing to do these days. So let's also give him a big hand. Thank you, Dr. Mithika, for joining us. Now, without taking much time, let me call upon Mr. Philip to moderate the next session.
Thank you so much, Prof. Satish Kumar, for that. I usually like breaking the name in between for that session. Actually, when I was listening to Dr. Meseret, I was not aware that she was an alumni of summer school. The first, when the name was proposed, I said, we need to listen to this senior doctor. And I'm more than excited to see the transformation the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice is actually doing. Allow me also to mention in Mindist, we also have one of the richest men in this particular continent managing a funding facility that is almost in tune of billions. The financing climate, which is actually financing climate action, locally led climate action in Kenya, FLOCA, Mr. Odego in our midst. So we do appreciate the beautiful work that particular fund is doing. And just again, to let the cat out of the bag slightly, that he has also offered to support almost close to 100 students for Nairobi Summer School on climate justice this year. Meaning that again, that impact will continue to grow in terms of its magnitude as we move to the next level, given again that particular contribution. We are getting to the crux of our today's event. It's meant to be a press conference, and I'm happy to again state that the members of press arrived before us. They were here at as early as 1:40. So again, an indication of their commitment to ensure that Africa is sufficiently informed in terms of critical issues, and they are again keen to take the agenda forward in all spaces, which we must appreciate. Let's give them a clap. And equally, we have quite a number of media players online, who will be quite important to this particular event. Today, I'm not the main speaker, I'm just a moderator of a conversation. I want to start by constituting my panel, and I'll start it in a very interesting manner. I'll start by calling Asefa. I usually have difficulties with the other names. Asefa is from the Youth Print and also a member of the African Youth Commission here in Addis Ababa. Kindly take your seat in the front. We have Mr. Obed Korigo, who is a policy advisor for Care International. Obed, kindly take your esteemed space in the front. We have Mr. Peter Odego, who is a coordinator of funding locally led climate action program within the Treasury of Kenya. Peter Odego, your place is well reserved at the fore. And then we have Dr. Maseret Abatum, who is a lecturer on issues of environmental science in Kotebe Education University in Addis Ababa. I would have preferred the men do not sit closer to each other. Obed, I would prefer the men do not sit closer to each other. Just take the extreme end. I'm trying to do a bit of exchange. Then we have Mr. Charles Mwangi, who is the head of policy, who is the head of program and research for the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Charles, your esteemed space is there for you. And then Jessica will start us off with the process. Being a press statement process, the process is simple. One, we'll walk through the statement that we prepared. This statement is prepared in a context where Africa is in urgent need for resources for adaptation. Indeed, priority, the core priority for Africa is adaptation, and is prepared in a context where, again, the global goal on adaptation that ought to anchor the adaptation agenda within global climate diplomacy has been facing some certain challenges. But we are again trying to see whether within the 2-year work program period, we can actually be able to rescue it and bring it on track and ensure that there is a global commitment and action on adaptation. That's the first context, which is important. Again, the 100 billion commitment, US dollar commitment in terms of funding is also coming to lapse. And again, there is a global effort to again structure a new goal in terms of financing at global level, the new collective and quantified financial goal, which is important to us. And we want to see, again, we are at a time when we are trying to see whether these two goals will speak to each other or they will be divergent, whether they will be ambitious or they will still maintain status quo. And our statement again speaks fundamentally to those issues. The panel that I've just constructed will unpack the statement. So Jessica, if you can survive within 10 to 15 minutes, that would be good, but don't bite your tongue. Thanks.
Thank you, Philip. My work here is very simple, just to read through the statement. And our title is Adaptation and Finance are Top Priorities for Africa. The global goal on adaptation and the new collective quantified goal should reflect this reality. The Pan-Africa Climate Justice Alliance, in collaboration with Care International and other partners, organized a comprehensive and outcome-oriented forum to promote accountability and advance the climate finance agenda, with a particular focus on adaptation needs of the African continent. The primary objective of the forum was to contribute to the outcomes of the 10th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development Goals and make preparation for SB60. Held over 2 days on April 17 and 18, 2024, the dialogue aimed to explore ways to secure climate adaptation for Africa within the Global Goal on Adaptation and provide critical recommendations to inform the design of the new collective and quantified financial goal. The forum brought together experts and stakeholders from diverse sectors to deliberate on the most pressing issues related to climate adaptation in Africa and identify practical solutions to address them. The discussion centered on key themes such as building momentum towards COP29, enhancing accountability and transparency in climate finance, and leveraging partnership to mobilize resources for climate adaptation in Africa. The forum's recommendations are expected to inform the design of the NCQG and contribute to the broader global efforts to tackle climate change. The outcomes of the forum will also be instrumental in advancing the climate adaptation agenda in Africa and ensuring that the continent's unique needs and priorities are well represented in global climate negotiations. Aware that Article 7 of the Paris Agreement established the global goal on adaptation to enhance adaptive capacity, strengthen resilience, and reduce vulnerability to climate change. Recognizing the ongoing work under the Global Goal on Adaptation by the UAE Framework for Global Climate Resilience, and that adaptation is a global challenge with various dimensions and emphasis on the long-term global response to climate change to protect people, livelihoods, and ecosystems. Taking into account the urgent and immediate needs of the developing countries, taking into account the urgent and immediate needs of developing country parties, frontline communities, and indigenous people that are particularly vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change. Concerned about the lack of commitment by developed countries to provide adequate, predictable, timely, and need-based financial support to developing countries to fast-track the implementation of adaptation programs, despite the Paris Agreement being underpinned by the principles of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Noting that the Adaptation Gap Report of 2023 highlights that adaptation is underfinanced and that countries are least prepared, with only 26 countries in Africa having developed their national adaptation plans. Concerned about the slow progress in the formulation and implementation of NAPs at the country level and at the UNFCCC negotiations have not made any significant progress, especially on the critical aspect of financing, which is essential in their implementation. Recalling the IPCC ARC6 report that asserts that Africa will be impacted by climate change under all mitigation scenarios, setting a stage for demand for accelerated adaptation and response measures on loss and damage. Disturbed by the fact that the climate crisis persists as a formidable obstacle to Africa's development and the well-being of its inhabitants, and that there is a lack of urgency in addressing critical issues relevant to the continent. Concerned about the continuous double counting of official development assistance as climate finance and Norway's proposal to augment the same given sluggishness in defining climate finance. Deeply concerned that access to climate finance, whether through direct or indirect mechanism, is not working for African countries, and that bureaucratic and highly technocratic processes make the process lengthy and create complexities that deter community institutions from accessing it. Noting the guiding principle emanating from COP28 that underlines fairness and equity, calling on parties to collectively align with just and equitable pathways towards achieving 1.5 degrees Celsius without overshooting the purpose of the Paris Agreement in Article 2.1, and to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change in the context of sustainable development and the eradication of poverty. Aware that the UAE BLM work program must acknowledge that the impacts of climate change are unequal. Therefore, it is vital that the principles of CBDR-RC is applied while developing indicators to ensure equity and justice in access to means of implementation. Conscious of the funding challenges that constrain the processes of developing comprehensive and agile national and regional frameworks to respond to climate change and its potential ramification in framing the GGA indicators and targets in African countries, awful of the responsibility of establishing a new collective and quantified financial goal in 2024. Here and in securing the adaptation and financing interest for Africa, recommend the following. On securing the global goal on adaptation. Centering adaptation in NIFES and national determined contribution. Under this one, we call on African parties to accelerate the integration of adaptation into local, national, and regional planning, including developing and implementing participatory, inclusive, and gender transformative national adaptation plans. And join developed countries and multilateral funding bodies, including those under the United Nations Framework on Climate Change, like the GCF, to prioritize and accelerate access to new, additional, and grant-based funding for African countries to formulate and implement their NIFES as an integral component for achieving the global goal on adaptation targets on planning and implementation by 2030 as per decision 2/CMA5. We demand that developed country parties update and submit ambitious NDCs consistent with the provision of Article 3 and 4 of the Paris Agreement to keep alive the goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. On actualizing the global goal on adaptation, we call on specific context-based indicators that align with the realities of local communities, indigenous people, and marginalized communities. These indicators must align with thematic and dimensional targets within the GGA and be gender responsive. We request that the GGA indicators be flexible to allow for periodic review to accommodate the climate change dynamics for communities likely to repeatedly face the same crisis. We recommend that the UAE BLM work program integrates the development of indicators, highlighting the means of implementation, such as finance, capacity, and technology required to achieve the GGA across each of the 11 targets. We call on parties to adopt a standardized methodology for monitoring, evaluating, and reporting progress at the global level and contextualized at national and local levels, building on countries' existing mail system. We reiterate the need to identify and judiciously align relevant indicators from existing frameworks such as Sentai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, the Sustainable Development Goals, the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and other multilateral agreements. On securing climate finance for long-term We call for securing climate finance for sustainable long-term action. And in order to do that, we require a progressive outlook for the new collective and quantifiable goal on climate finance goal. We underscore the NCQG must rely on a science and need-based approach to deliver an urgent scale-up of public climate finance in line with principles of equity, common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. That NCQG should be anchored on the provisions of the Paris Agreement, Article 2.1c, on making climate finance flows consistent with low carbon and climate resilient development pathway. The NCQG quantum should be informed by national data reflecting actual needs for climate change adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage, and must adopt a people-centered, locally-led, inclusive approach, including the use of national adaptation plans and national determined contribution to inform the NCQG. The adaptation finance sub-goal of the NCQG should be new, additional, grant-based, or grant equivalent. The NCQG should have a robust mechanism for direct access to finance and decision-making for local institutions and communities. First milestone in the mobilization of NCQG for ease in tracking and accountability goals in means of accounting for climate finance to eliminate double counting. The NCQG process should develop a consistent and standardized approach for accounting climate finance to eliminate the problem of double counting that has characterized the climate finance landscape. Anchoring the loss and damage funds in the NCQG. Loss and damage fund should have a fundraising strategy complemented by a sub-clear goal for long-term funding enabled by NCQG. Loss and damage fund should be grounded in the principles of climate justice, CBDRC, human rights, including children's rights and gender equality, and financed from grant-based or grant equivalent sources. Loss and damage fund should be directly accessible to governments, civil society organizations, and vulnerable and marginalized groups in developing countries. Provide for a readiness facility should support countries and communities to better prepare and set up agile and inclusive policy and institutional frameworks for responding to loss and damage. In securing just access modalities for enhanced access to climate finance to frontline communities. We call for access mechanisms that are direct and flexible to accommodate the needs of developing countries and their people. Continue to advocate for a robust and gender-responsive mechanism for direct access to grant-based finance for the most vulnerable communities, such as women, youth, elderly, children, indigenous people, and their institutions. In a broad sense, call for elimination of bottlenecks to climate finance under NCQG that have either impeded access to funds by the developing countries. Advancing for a climate just definition of climate finance. Pursue a definition asserting that climate finance consists of only cross-border flows from developed to developing countries that have been actually dispersed and are new and additional, climate-specific, and in the form of grant or grant equivalent, consistent with principles of climate justice. In principle, pursue a definition under which loans from developed countries to developing countries fully paid for and in interest are not computed as part of climate finance contribution of developed countries. A further call on African political leaders to demonstrate leadership in the following. Pursue high-level political dialogues with leaders from the North to secure political commitment for actionable and ambitious NCQG and securing climate finance flows as per the commitment. Positioning Africa as a champion for developing the global goal on adaptation through demonstrated leadership in reviewing their national adaptation plans and their nationally determined contribution with strong adaptation targets and utilizing this in influencing the framing of the goal. Leveraging on its leadership to form formidable influence bloc to exert pressure towards the securing of the global goal on adaptation by strengthening South-to-South cooperation through the G77 and China, and building alliances with other developed countries bloc. Provide political leadership regarding whether loans to African countries meant to finance climate action and which are paid with interest by African countries should be computed as climate finance contribution of developed countries. Collectively, as a continent, under the convenership of the CASOC, pursue strategic communication on GGA, harnessing our collective voice and utilizing all strategic spaces in pursuit of this goal. Call on regional technical bodies such as UNECA to provide synthesis information to the political leadership to enhance their effectiveness in the influencing process on GGA and NCQG. And lastly, emphasis on their leadership role in ordering leaders in developed countries and in their role in creating ample conditions for facilitating non-state actors and other stakeholders' action in enhancing transparency and accountability in financial contribution and adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for walking us through that detailed statement and having the bandwidth to sustain that pace of walking through it. If it were me, I would have stopped midway. But just to give you a quick overview, this statement is spanning political recommendations or giving some elements of political recommendation, but it's also giving technical recommendations. The technical recommendation focusing on the negotiation processes, particularly on the new collective and quantified goal and on adaptation issues, but then the need for political pressure to actualize whatever we are pursuing within the negotiation space is an imperative that has also been spoken to in terms of the concrete recommendation. And it will be available as a comprehensive statement shortly. But to move forward, we want to begin looking at the team that is actually at the fore, that is actually meant to unpack the statement. And I want to start from my brother on immediate right, Peter Odego. Again, when I was introducing him, I said he is the convener of FLOCA, a coordinator of FLOCA, which is funding locally led climate action, one of the biggest programs that aims to ensure that adaptation actions take place at national level in Kenya. But equally, he convenes all the African designated authorities, which are actually bodies that coordinate climate action, and particularly in terms of pursuing funding from entities that are relevant at global level, which is quite a big role that is managing. And I want to start with Peter Odego in terms of what you've heard and sort of unpacking the global goal on adaptation and connecting it more with the new collective quantified goal. And in particular, also telling us what are the realities in Africa and how can we navigate those realities to have a progressive goal, but also to secure the funding that we need. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. Let me take this opportunity also to thank dearly the leadership of PACJA, which has brought us here. And as you are aware, PACJA is a partner of Africa Green Climate National Designated Authorities Funds. AFDAN is the convener of all the green funds in the continent. And given that we are partnering with the PACJA, is a great honors for us and for the continent to see how the statement that has been read can be actualized, and actually the justice and the front line that has been talked about can be realized. Again, I'm talking on also because I sit at the National Treasury equivalent of your Minister of Finance, where the money is being distributed, and coordinate that one among the ministries all over in Kenya. And of course, having been part of the Green Climate Fund as the NDA for Kenya, I know a lot what has been going on in terms when it reaches to the point of transiting and mobilizing climate finance from different sources and channeling it to where it is being. Charles, what has been talked about here, unpacking the new quantifiable goal, it's not a journey that has started here. From 2015, from $100 billion per year. In fact, it is not $100 billion. It started during the Copenhagen Accord with the Green Fund. Even the achievement of that Green Fund then, of 30 billion then, was questionable. Later, when now accountability, tracking, and reporting it came in. So the developed yes. So as early as 2009, 2010, there had already been an argument that the committed amount during these COPs were being followed. It moved up until 2015 now, when the old quantifiable goal was set up 100 billion per year up to 2020. But I'm very lucky to sit with professors here and researchers here. The English is very plain. 100 billion per year up to 2020. If you use a straight line mathematical model, how much is that? By 2020, from 2015 floor, it was supposed to be more than almost $1 trillion of US dollars then. But when we moved to the Glasgow, where now there was, we wanted accountability, by that time they said, not taking into consideration of the OECD report, we said they have already met the goal. So when they were now subjected to numbers, they said, oh, we did a mathematical mistake. We had only collected $73 billion. Now look, $73 billion from the floor of 2015 thereof to 100 billion per year up to 2020, we were lacking more than 420 billion then. But the interesting thing that these guys and us went ahead and started establishing a new quantifiable goal by 2025, of which in 2020, the adaptation gap analysis indicated clearly that the financing adaptation, which is the priority of African countries where we all come from. And when you look at our NDC, it is birth adaptation. It declined by $4 billion by 2020, from 2020 to 2021 to 2022. That is after the other one had already passed. Now, if you look at that, and then now we are now in the 2025, now the new quantifiable goal that is well articulated here. In summary, as at this month, because we are remaining with 1.8 years, that is only a year and 8 months. Now, if we have failed from 2010 to meet that, to meet what was promised, I definitely, authentically, obviously convinced that at no point are we going to meet that deadline. Zero. Whatever we do, we are not going to meet it, because we have to rewind the clock backwards. History informs current situation. The current situation informs the future, and the future enables us to model and see whether we are on the track or the right track. Today, adaptation measures, they're all over the country now, all over the world, are now receiving more intense climate impacts than ever before. Even the people who are promising them, now their climate change is now at their doorstep, and the goals are now changing. So in summary, Charles, two things. One, Africa, we must be on our own if we are to move. Two, we need to move from the global bigger picture to create locally led climate actions like FLOCA, financing locally led. What have we done there then? By 2020, we saw that continuous talk and going to circle was not helping us. We established what we call a $1 billion GFLOCA, funded by government partly, World Bank, Daneda, SEDA, they came in. And by last week, almost 10.3 billion has already been given to the lowest level what possible. That is 1,550 watts in Kenya, in cash. By the way, that's why I was not with you here. I was struggling to take the money to the front line. And when I did that, I am here with you to share with you. It has now gone. And now people in Kenya at the community level are now finalizing what they are called PCRA, Participatory Climate Risk Assessment, which now are going to assess areas of high level where climate impacts where they want to do invest in adaptation. And we are going to get that one. But now that is on our own. In New York, there is a spring meeting. We are scaling up our global FLOCA fund to 5 billion by 2030. And from there now we will be able to see how we go.
Thank you so much, Peter, for those perspectives. At one point, I felt like you were actually dampening the mood, but then you elevated the spirit. But I'll still come back to you later on a fundamental question of debt and climate action. I'll come back to you on that because, again, FLOCA has an element around that. But I want to look at because there is still a dark side to it. The commitments, we've not been able to meet 100 billion. That's a fact. And now we are going to new collective quantified goal. But before we get there, we are clear that we need adaptation on board. Adaptation, which is so key and so critical to us, we need it to be on board the conversation. And again, we know we were supposed to secure that goal in Dubai. We missed it. Obed, I want to cross over to you. Just to paint a picture to us in terms of how the process, the forward-looking process on the GGA looks like, and where are the itches, where are the critical impediments that we need to take note of, and also begin to speak about how we can also address that. Over to you, Obed.
Thank you so much, Philip, and thank you, PACJA, for the partnership. We're happy to be partnering with you on this event. Specifically when talking about adaptation and adaptation finance, it's really a topic that is also at the heart of CARE International and the work that we do with our communities. Of course, when Jessica was reading the statement, she was talking about GGA, and I'm sure people are wondering, what is this animal called GGA? GGA is a global goal on adaptation, and this is anchored under the Paris Agreement, Article number 7, and it's supposed to deliver adaptation, action, and support. And the main objective of the GGA is to enhance adaptive capacity, strengthen resilience, and also reduce vulnerability of communities while enhancing status of adaptation and improving financial flows. But since it was established in COP21 under the Paris Agreement, for a long time, countries haven't been able to develop metrics, indicators, and derive measures on how they can even sort of assess progress on how adaptation can be achieved. That's why mitigation is way ahead, because they already know the goal and they know how to achieve, but adaptation is really, really difficult to measure. And this has been the impediment, the key impediment in the global goal on adaptation. And of course, as we know, the adaptation is at the core of, especially when it comes to Africa, when we talk about farmers, fisher folks, when we talk about indigenous communities, and really it has to be given the prominence it deserves. So, so what has been lacking, of course, is a framework to be able to achieve the global goal adaptation, and also, guide how to measure the progress of adaptation. So at COP28, countries agreed on a framework that was labeled or dubbed UAE framework for global climate resilience. And basically, this framework is going to guide the achievement of the global goal on adaptation, and of course, review the overall progress in achieving this goal. And under this goal, the countries or parties established 11 key targets, and 7 of them are thematic targets, and they relate or highlight global priorities for adaptation in key sectors that they thought are very, very important, such as water, food and agriculture, health, ecosystems, biodiversity, infrastructure, and cultural heritage. Then we have 4 targets, which are called dimensional targets that were, are of course, which relate to the adaptation cycle. Now, we also have some of the cross-cutting considerations that were agreed, including, of course, implementing the framework in a gender-responsive, participatory, and fully transparent manner. Of course, just to give you a background on where we are in terms of the global goal adaptation and what was agreed in COP28. But of course, some of the issues, as Philip, as you mentioned, that we think were not addressed fully. Of course, we agree that the key principles, such as the equity, common but differentiated responsibility, should really guide the work that we do. And this is what developing countries were really pushing, that this CBDR, RCOs, common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities should really be anchored in the global goal adaptation. And this was not really achieved. Another area is around finance, and which is the big elephant in the room, and my brother Odengo has really alluded to that. We have a very weak language, especially on finance, and especially having specific targets on means of implementation. Means of implementation, which are finance, capacity building, and technology. Of course, here the big animal is finance still. So this really, the absence of the means of implementation targets in the framework really makes the framework lack much needed ambition, and really slows the progress that we want to see on adaptation. Having said that, adaptation has really not been given the prominence it deserves. Even look at COP28, even the number of pledges when it comes to adaptation are way, way low. Even adaptation fund really didn't even achieve even half of the target that they wanted to achieve in terms of the number of finance they wanted to mobilize. We have, of course, the adaptation gap report that really paints a very, very sort of worrying picture on the adaptation finance gap, and especially also alluding to the fact that adaptation finance has reduced by 15%. If you look at the 2021 figures, we have national adaptation plans, which are our key vehicles for implementing adaptation action on the ground. Countries, especially African countries, have been struggling not actually to implement, even securing finance, the readiness finance, to be able to even develop or formulate these NAPs, leave alone financing them. But we also have our NDCs that also have our adaptation component. And we are talking about, the statement talks about ambitious NDCs. And of course, the question that we keep on asking ourselves, how ambitious are you gonna be? Because already our NDCs are already ambitious, and they require finance to be able to implement those. Of course, if you look at the Ethiopia NDC, it requires actually $316 billion to implement. So where is that money? Where is the money? But of course, moving forward in terms of the GGA, Global Goal on Adaptation, now the work has begun to develop indicators to be able to achieve those targets. It's going to be a 2-year work program called UAE Belém Work Program. And this is also something that I think we need to see how to engage in and ensure that we have indicators really that speak to what we want to see. As I finish, Philip, the issue of locally led adaptation is really, really important. And Odenga has already alluded to that. And the GGA really has to make sure that this is really reflected even in the indicators that are going to be developed. we really need also to see our own experts, even those indicators, they're going to be developed. In my queue, the GGA actually originated from Africa. But what happens in between here, these processes are hijacked by the North. So as we develop indicators, we want to see our own experts and body organizations that are already doing a lot of work on adaptation and using our own evidence to inform the indicators and ultimately actually even informing the NCQG. Then, of course, I think I want to stop there. But one last thing, the GGA framework talks about countries developing their NAPs and starting to implement latest by 2030. All countries needed to have done that by 2030, but we need that financing. So we need also to see, as we talk about, of course, local-led adaptation, we need to see bodies like GCF being reformed to be able to enhance access to countries to be able to get this money to be able to implement, formulate and implement their NAP. So those are some of the few issues I'm happy to add if I get a chance. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Obed, for really walking us through and unpacking the GGA, the Global Goal on Adaptation conversation in a very able way. 7 sectoral indicators, 4 multidimensional indicators. That sounds quite a mouthful, but again, Global Goal on Adaptation is our baby. But the baby has been baptized. It has been convoluted within the negotiation process to the extent that as Africans, we can no longer associate with it. So we have the challenge of associating with it and understanding what it is. But Obed, you've done quite a justice in terms of breaking it. And I want to cross over to my dear sister, Meseret. Very useful. And I know you work, Dr. Meseret, you work with institutions of learning, you are in charge of research, you are in control of evidence. For us to premise a global goal on adaptation will require a lot of evidence. And I'm looking at how can African research institutions and universities position themselves within the process and help Africa move up to speed in terms of leading the process around the global goal on adaptation. Over to you. And as you deal with that, just one more, I'm also looking at you from the perspective of being a woman. And I'm not saying gender is about women alone, it's about all of us. But again, being able to understand that different genders experience climate change in different ways. But then again, when it comes to the global goal on adaptation, particularly from the sectoral point of view, it will be important to see how we are promoting inclusion across. So you can actually take it up. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much. Before just proceeding to your questions, I want to say a few points about the importance of climate finance. So when we are talking about climate finance, as I tried to mention, some of the environmental problems as Africans that we are facing these days, we need climate finance for restoration, for rehabilitation, and for restoration purpose. So climate finance, especially for Africans, is very crucial and is very important. The other point, climate researches for the relating with climate. So we need climate finance or funds to conduct different researches, especially to see the effects of climate change, to show the reality on the ground, and also even to get funds, we need scientific-based or evidence-based researchers. So for this, we need finance. If we take Ethiopian universities as an example, we have constraints in finance, and we are not, I cannot say we are not doing the best, we all are doing the best, but because of these financial constraints, we cannot show the real truth or the ground is what's happening because of the impact is what's happening in the ground. So climate finance is also very important for researchers. So even for decision making. So for decision makers, they need scientific based evidence. So if we are able to show the reality on the ground, we can secure funds, and also we can be able to make to help decision makers. The other ones, we need scientific figures, especially when we are talking about climate change. There might be a lot of researches and also a lot of scientific evidences that will show how climate change, how the climate is changing, at the same time, how the climate change is affecting the livelihoods, the community, and the people in general. So scientific researches in Africa are a bit back because of this financial constraint, and we are not doing to our best. It's mainly because of the finance. So that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Meseret, for that unpacking. I'll still come back to you on the gender question, but I want to cross over to young people. Asefa, I know you've been in it. What do you see as a contribution of young people towards securing the global goal on adaptation, and again, the new collective quantified goal? Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I think my name is Yapsaga. It's not Asafa because I'm saying it. It's a masculine name because most of our attendees are Ethiopians, and they might be, my name is Asafarna, but my name is Yapsaga. I'm representing the AYC Youth Sprint. I think we all talk about the climate finance, global goal adaptation, and even the negotiation process. But how can they contribute for the climate finance, and also how can they make it happen in their projects? I think we should discuss that. The first thing is, as a youth, we do have a lot of ideas, especially now we do have the education, we do have the knowledge, and we are trying to do the entrepreneurial activities. So we need the climate finance. As we all know, for Ethiopia, even for all of Africa, we are more focusing, the developed countries want us to focus on more mitigation, but what we need to focus and implement is adaptation. We all agree on that. So how can we do that? So the first thing is, I think as a youth, initiating the grassroots projects and utilizing the climate finance is the best thing, because localization is important on implementing the adaptation processes. Besides that, on the negotiation process, advocacy and influencing the negotiation process is also the most and the prominent part of the youth should be, because these days we do have the knowledge, so we can influence more the negotiation process. The other thing is, when we are talking about the climate finance, it is also a debt, right, for us. So how can we have our own finance? We should also think that as a youth can contribute on that, because if we are depending on the finance that are coming on our way, after some times it's going to be a debt. So youth can contribute on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and apologies. I'm not in any way meant to change your gender. You can be sure about that. Yapsenga, the pronunciation of the name is slightly off my track. That's why I had to go to the most aligning. And recently, you graduated as a negotiator on which area?
I'm sorry. I took the African Group of Negotiators training, and I'm following the Just Transition negotiation right now.
Absolutely.
And also, I think I should mention that I am also the alumni of Summer School, Cohort 3.
Thank you so much for that bit of introduction. I just wanted to indicate that the Nairobi Summer School on Climate Justice is just a foundational training, and then young people can build on that. Happy to see you negotiating on this exciting area of just transition, which again will also be quite interesting. Charles, there are many issues that are coming across that are political in character. And again, as a continent, our weakest point has been in the political leadership. how do we navigate the political landscape to secure the goal itself first, that is the global goal on adaptation, but also ensure that it's sufficiently resourced. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Philip. If I had the power, if I had the means, I'd propose that before every COP, probably our negotiators should be exposed to a motivational speaker who is good in addressing the question of dealing with addiction to hypocrisy, but also the art of dealing, or of embracing what we call moral obligations, or our moral obligations. Now, yesterday, I was watching CNN in my room, and I watched Democrats and Republicans in the US taking some few hours, just a few hours, to vote in Congress. And they were voting to release 95 billion US dollars to Taiwan, to Israel, to Ukraine, to support the war. And when we were taking, I think, our breakfast in the morning, I was watching BBC, at our dining place. And I could see celebrations that in actual sense, Congress actually passed that particular amount of money. 95 billion US dollars. Now, when Rebecca was speaking, he indicated that countries committed, in Copenhagen to contribute 100 billion US dollars per year. And he goes on to say that in actual sense, after reprimanding those parties and after exerting so much pressure, they accepted probably we are around 75 billion. But in a few hours, one country, US, was able to sign 95 billion. I followed the conversation last year. The conversation was about, again, committing 115 billion US dollars, again, to support war. It's not to provide food to people who are suffering in Mozambique and other countries. It's not even about technology transfer. It's not about even building probably power plants in countries like Niger where they don't have power. It's about weapons. It's about missiles. It's about instruments and weapons that are causing havoc in many countries, that are causing deaths to children, that are causing deaths to women, and most importantly, that are also causing, increase in our greenhouse gases. We were checking in the morning with my colleague, and there's some analysis. I can't put the source at the moment, but so far, about 200,000 metric tons have been released as a result of war in Israel alone. I don't know about Ukraine. I don't know about the other countries that are actually in war. 95 billion in 2 hours, one country. But it has become so difficult for more than, I think, 13 years now to achieve 100 billion target. Tell me, if that is not hypocrisy, tell me, how do we define hypocrisy? If that not assuming our moral obligation, tell me which vocabulary we're going to use to define that. So we have said it once and again that money is not a problem. The world has enough money to solve the problems we have in climate change. But we don't want to embrace our moral obligation. We don't want to be appreciate the reality that there is. We were chatting again over lunch hour in my own country, Nairobi. We were swimming. We were actually making fun of our colleagues who traveled yesterday, and we were asking whether they swam their way, to Addis. You saw what happened in Dubai, in terms of the kind of rains that fell in that particular area. Although some people are arguing that that could be crowd seeding, and this crowd seeding is part of geoengineering that we've been against as PACJA, trying to modify. We're not very sure whether that is a cause. But the reality of the matter is these impacts are with us here. The resources are available, but the resources are only available to cause havoc in the world and to cause many wars and deaths of many children. Now, that aside, in our conversation here on Wednesday and Thursday, we were looking at the question of climate finance and how we can ensure that it's accessible and it's sufficient. And we listened to a report by one of our partner organizations, development initiatives. And the analysis was very, very shocking. I don't want to put countries here, but the data that was presented to us indicated that some countries reported investments in building of chocolate farms as climate finance. Worse still, one country actually reported that they supported Egypt in innovating, I think, one of the airports, and that they counted as climate finance. But what is even more worrying is that one country actually reported some money that was used to support building of a coal plant as climate finance. Meaning, Peter, that even the 73 billion they're talking about, when you do some scrutiny, when you do some deeper analysis, you realize that in actual sense, what actually would actually qualify as climate finance might be very, very, very true. Now, GCF, which we take pride in, because as civil societies, of course, we contributed and we put pressure for establishment of that particular fund. I think so far they have not more than 12.8 billion or thereabout that has been able to collect all those years. But in 2 hours, 95 billion has gone to war. So if this is not hypocrisy, ladies and gentlemen, tell me, what are we talking about? So we may commit our time, we commit our resources in attending these COPs. But until we address the hypocrisy that is there with our partners, especially the developed country partners, we'll never make headway. Give and take. African countries have got, very ambitious NDCs. Never mind, the NDCs are not ours, they were generated by people that we trusted to actually define, what our needs are in NDCs. But if the countries in the north can actually be able to honor their commitments, they're not even give any money, but at least they implement the NDCs to the fullness, then probably we'll be talking about maybe reduction of our greenhouse gas emissions. Even though data is telling us that even with 100% implementation, we headed for 2.7 degree, trajectory as it were. But coming back to the question of NCQG, this new and quantified, finance goal. The 100 billion that Peter talked about, and we have always been saying was actually a political figure, notwithstanding the fact that it never saw the light of the day. But now as I think about this new goal, post 2025, we must be very, very, very keen as members of the African continent in ensuring that that goal speaks to the needs, first and foremost, of the African people. How do we do it? We must make sure that that goal is actually informed by our adaptation needs. We cannot just come up with a hypothetical goal or a goal that is not informed by empirical evidence and data. But that data cannot come from outside. It must be generated by our African universities. We must also embrace even our great data that is not necessarily published, but which we believe, it's data that is credible and that we can actually be able to use to actually, determine first and foremost what our adaptation needs. I know the AGN tried last year to actually define a quantum, that then would actually contribute to the GGA from the African perspective. And I think they came up with a figure of about $400 billion US. That's what are the needs for adaptation for the African continent. But beyond that, we must also look at loss and damage. In as much as it is impossible to quantify some of the losses, like loss of our cultural heritage, loss of rights, and so on and so forth, but at least we can make an attempt to actually also quantify, with empirical evidence, what Africa needs in terms of dealing, with the loss and damage, issues. So loss and damage conversation must build into NCQG. Our GGA, the goal for the global goal for adaptation, must also inform SQG. And CQG cannot operate alone. It must be informed, by these processes. When we talk about just transition again, what our energy needs, what we need also to transition, all these are figures that we must define from the continent, and we must communicate this so that as we come up with a new goal, then that goal is actually clear, and that goal is actually informed by felt realities. But to me, a goal is just a goal. It must be yet another piece of paper. We require political activation to ensure that money is actually availed in that particular city. What Obed mentioned when he was talking about GGA, he mentioned one thing, that the means of implementation is a critical element of GGA. But there has been a lot of controversy around, the means of implementation. Means of implementation simply talks about the things we talked about, finances, technology transfer, and so on and so forth. Those are key aspects that must be there. So what we need to do as a continent, one, we must speak in one voice. So our unity cannot be compromised. We can't afford, to speak as separate entities. We must not start seeing ourselves as LDCs versus the others who are non-LDCs in the country, Africa. We must not see ourselves as Sub-Saharan Africa and Northern Africa and wherever. We must not see ourselves as small islands. We must not necessarily see ourselves within, what I call the colonial boundaries. We must speak in one voice as members of the same continent. Number two, Africa is well endowed with a lot of resources. Natural resources that are key, in terms of supporting our trajectory we're taking towards, green energy. But we must also make sure that we safeguard our resources. Our resources are oozing out of this continent, right, left, and center. We were discussing yesterday with a colleague from Zimbabwe who studied geology, and it was interesting how even their curriculum, their geology curriculum, is defined by someone else. There are some things the students must not know about the minerals that are there. In Zimbabwe, for example, how do we ensure that we safeguard our minerals? And this brings in the critical question of the critical minerals, which are important for transition. But again, how quick are we going to ensure that we safeguard them to support us in transition, but also look at how technologies are changing? Because very soon, those minerals will also become stranded assets, because technologies are now also changing, which might not necessarily need now lithium and the others. So we must all look at all this, safeguard our resources, and ensure that are going to support us in terms of our own, domestic, resource mobilization, and ensure that that works. Number two, or this is number three, we must reject in capital letters false solutions and distractions. If it's about SQG and basically how countries are supposed to also remit their monies, we must refuse false solutions that are being fronted. Now, we've been talking about the carbon markets, and I think that is a campaign that we've been running across Africa, as Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Are carbon markets going to be the solution to the challenges that we have? Is that an avenue that we're going to get resources to build our adaptive capacities? We must scrutinize some of these for solutions and ensure that they don't bridle us from the picture that is ahead of us and from the call for developed country parties to actually avail resources that are actually needed. But most importantly, we must start giving ultimatums to some of these calls. We've been employing Rule 16 more often than not in terms of postponing some of the critical conversations. But Africa, and through the AGN, we must start now putting ultimatums in terms of when we need some of these things to happen, because we are the people who are suffering most. The impacts are here with us, and whoever is the bearer of the shoe or the wearer of the shoe knows where it pinches most. Allow me to raise my case there, Philip.
Thank you, Charles, and thank you for navigating an interesting landscape, but also at the core of what you were navigating, also emphasizing accountability of our political leadership, for them actually leading the onslaught in terms of engaging the leaders from the north, for them to be accountable. And that is at the core of our mother campaign, which is Keep Your Promise, which aims again to push developed countries, first and foremost, to cut on their emission, and secondly, to honor their financial commitment. As you were making your submission, I felt like there is an opportunity to connect this with the conversation that I needed to come back to for Mr. Odeko to address. And I like thinking practically. I'm assuming I'm the owner of this hotel for purposes of elevating my ego temporarily. And I borrowed money from Ethiopian bank and I built the hotel. Does the hotel belong to Ethiopian bank or does it belong to me? These are questions that we need to ask, because funding is coming in forms of loans. And within the statement, what we've done is, again, to stir the waters a bit and say that climate, what these guys are calling climate funding, that is coming to Africa in form of loans, cannot be treated. And again, it's fully paid for by Africa. They receive the loan and they fully pay it. Cannot be treated as climate finance contribution of the global north. Your take.
My take is very, very simple. And you've answered the same question. One, when you look at the amount that these people, the developed countries, are giving as loans, even within the Green Climate Fund, which was designed specifically to mobilize climate finance in scale and provide it to the lowest level possible with ease of implementation. Indeed, the GCF was supposed to be covering the means of implementation, particularly finance. Because once you have the finance, technology and capacity follows, they need the money. But that, when you look at the structure of that new fund, which Obed Korigo, my friend here, Charles is no longer talking about, the bulk of that money, more than 80% is being given as concessional loans to the same bigger multilateral banks, the culprits that caused the problem. Now, being an insider there and Kenya being a front runner anyway, after studying that from 2013 to 20 up to date, and having data which is very clearly indicating that climate change is no longer weather pattern and rain or the clouds. Climate change is now a developmental thing. But now when you look at what is developmental, these guys are lending money to development. And the development is water, which is the key principle of adaptation. These guys are giving loans to agriculture, smart climate agriculture, which is another core of our adaptation principle to build the local resilience. These guys are hiding into their banks to give them a loan, with low credit, 1.4%, to build their renewable energy infrastructure. It is upon that we looked forward, and we need to look forward to mean that whatever you have on your pocket is yours, and the condition is very clear on those loans that it is, for example, an Ethiopian concessional loan, or it is a Kenyan concessional loan. And when you look at the trajectory of all those arguments from 1975, JEF, which was created as a financing mechanism for environment, became out a total disappointment. How many people talk about JEF today? The money is still there and sitting on. Then we cried about adaptation fund again into 2017, all those 2007. Adaptation fund has only mobilized less than 100 billion since it was created. So where can you get money in large scale, which you can deploy with ease to your suffering local communities without necessarily waiting of the bureaucratic neo-systems of the funds like GCF, which we want to reform? It is upon this background, Charlie, that AFDAN is taking the GCF head on. We have to reform it. Without that, we will dissolve it. And with dissolving it, I am very happy that the geopolitics of the African Union after the cohort, the last item, the second last item was to recognize what AFDAN is doing in mobilizing climate finance for adaptation. The Kenya one is $1 billion, and it's going to be specifically for adaptation. And we want to expand it because that is the old way. We will not keep on sitting in rooms with people who don't trust us. The people who take our language, change it, and then they develop mathematical model, knowing that Africans are very, very, in quote, don't like to read mathematics. And then it becomes so complex, then you run out of that one, you leave them now to get interest on it, and then they cheat you that we are giving you new technology. Now, debt, we have now what is we call now debt swap for climate change. So what is happening, colleagues? Don't say it to anybody. These debts will not be paid. We will swap them for climate change. And whoever takes more now will have more climate finance. That my colleagues are crying here, because outside that system, you will not get climate finance. It is designed for them to deny you access, for them to fly in their team to get it. Now we have debt for nature swap. Then there is debt for water. Then there is debt for food security. Then there is sustainability linked bond, which we are now capturing all together. We put it into a pool because we are saying climate change is developmental. Even the money we got from climate change, what are we using it? To enhance access to water, to build the local resilience and the local capacity of improving our good seed and make our poor grandmothers be a little bit better. That is what? That is development. Now, do not fear that, because when you look at the scale of the thing, it will take you 10 years, Ethiopia, for example, to access $10 million grant from the GCF because the total amount they are mobilized is 11 billion for 154 counties that are also making noise. So it means that the FLOCA money that I'm talking about to you of $1 billion will not come in because where will you get it from? But using that as a county, but we know that it is our money, has now collateralized grants. People are now coming with grants. We are now saving on the interest rate, which was very whatever. For example, in Germany, now we sell them, guys, the loan you gave us 20 years ago, we have paid it. The balance just give us to, and they are listening. It is very, very critical now as an African continent. Two things. The geopolitics of climate change has reached its peak. And Charles, we need to penetrate the AU, the old guys' mentality of sleeping in that club must stop, because we will, if we combine it with the initiatives that are now going in and reforming the multilateral financial institution. You know, when you put World Bank into your pocket and they listen to you, when you put the European Investment Bank into your pocket, because originally they were not understanding climate change. Now they are listening. And as they are changing, Africans, we must now move quickly and very fast to have a multilateral prong, geopolitics, climate finance, diplomacy, because recently I was having a very high-level discussion with the Development Council from the Denmark, and they're now willing to support us. They are supporting Afghan to bring in reform in global systems there. And I told them that when they are releasing the next 450, about 850 million Danish kroners to the GCF, they are still holding it. I told them, please just give us ours. Don't give them, give us the Kenya portion, give us, because we have our FLOCA, which is working and it is really deployed. Yesterday, we deployed 100 million just like that. And now they are accessing it. You know, they laughed and they saw there is some sense. So do not demonize loan, but it is also, one, it should never be accounted as climate finance. We will return it. It is called, those ones should be called returnable grants. But returnable grants are not supposed to be classified as climate finance. And in Kenya, our law is very clear. When we are now tracking it and coding, we removed it. We removed all the loans in our climate finance landscape, and they made noise. But some of them are really glorifying that Kenya has taken a bold step to remove all the loans, and then we remain with our, not even removing, we took the loan to be Kenyan contribution. We did it. They made noise, but I didn't see other counties following us. That is my frustration. We did it, and we counted it as our own contribution. Yes, because we borrowed, the money is borrowed, we are papers, and we are paying anyway. Why are you not taking that route? That could be the best way of achieving means of implementation. Those loans are concessional. They are going to be paid after 40 years. Global systems are changing, but what we know with our models, we are not going to pay them. We are going to convert them, swap them at bilateral level, and it is working somehow. I will make announcement again, whatever. So what my final take, go to your own country, pay CAFDAN, and let's reform this thing. Without our negotiators, let them be on the table. Charles, be on that. But on the other side, we are very busy here. We are going to wait.
Thank you so much, Odego, for those quite insightful thoughts in terms of how we need to navigate the geopolitics. Let me provide an order in terms of how we proceed. I'll start with the journalists present, if you have questions, and the journalists online, if you have any specific question on the statement, and to the panelists. Before us, we can actually start by having your comments. Well, I hope Odego will survive, will not be declared pariah states in Africa for failing to pay loans. That was something that I'll still need your assurance. But more importantly is also the transformative approach. You go for the loans, it works. You go to the multilateral system, you tell them it's not working, and then accelerate the reform. I loved that element, which is very important. So we probably need to quickly document cases where such is working for purposes of reforming the multilateral system. Over to the members of Fourth Estate online and the present here. Anyone who has question, the floor is yours. The mic can be opened. And probably as you synthesize your question, I can also come back to the floor. I saw Augustine at one point banning midway to speak, but I want to see how many have questions and comments by show of hands so that we manage the session better. By show of hands, how many have questions and comments? You have 1, 2. Good. Let's start there. Let's have one mic moving there.
Thank you so much for the chance. I am Tayyar from Kotabe University of Education. I would like to add on to the climate and research issue, as I am from the higher education institutions. So we are mostly working on generating data, generating evidence, publish it, and disseminate to the globe for just effective implementation of adaptation and other climate issues. This is one part. The other one is just communicating and creating the platform to bring professionals together to deal on climate adaptation issues and other climate actions. The other may be just mainstreaming the evidence to the curriculum or to instructions, that's to make awareness to the students, so that they will be aware of what is going on the climate issues. The other one is just collaborating to other organizations like you, CSOs, so that a better implementation will be there, just to reach to the local community, so that their livelihood can be enhanced. Of course, there are so many challenges pertaining these issues. Still, there is lack of or unprepared multilateral coordination system. All are working on climate issues, but they are separately going. If you are just coming together, forces together, so that the livelihood of the local community especially can be enhanced. The other one is the scarcity of financial flow to the local community. Of course, so many are just raised on the financial issue. Now, just understand it. So those actors may have low awareness, especially for the local actors may have low awareness, low knowledge of climate adaptation issues. So that we need to build their capacity so that appropriate implementation can be done. The other one, what just this implies means that the adaptation remains a challenge to reach to the local community, which we are just planned to reach. So we need to collaborate to solve such problems. The higher education institutions, the CPOs, the non-governmental organizations, and the governmental actors should be coordinated together, should come together to solve such issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's have the mic on that side.
Mine is more of a comment than a question. Listening to the two great ladies up there, I kept on wondering the role that the universities and the youth could play broadly in the issues of climate change and even finance. I'm just looking at what PACJA is doing in Kenya. We have discussions around mainstreaming climate justice and children's rights, justice into the curriculum, whereby we can begin training our population early in life in terms of the climate, because it's climate change, because it's here with us and we don't know when it's going to go away. Maybe in Ethiopia, you could start thinking about that. Now, my main point is about innovation and technological transfer. Youth are very innovative, and universities are also very innovative. Maybe you could think about playing a role in coming up with innovations that can be contextualized at the local level to help communities to adapt to the climate change. And even more, thinking about how we can measure loss and damage at the local level. I know universities, they have a way of coming up with things, with methodologies. How can we measure loss and damage at the local level? Because now the loss and damage fund is here with us. We are waiting for it to be operationalized and we are not having data. So how can the university help the African continent in doing that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think those were the only two questions in the floor, from the floor. Allow me to change protocol. I will not come here, I'll just come here towards the end. And again, go back to the floor in public interests. And in the spirit of continuing partnership and collaboration, we recognize that this event has also been graced by universities, by students from University of Addis Ababa and Kotebe University also here. And we are not taking it for granted because it's part of the transformation journey that we are taking. I want to call upon Dr. Andisu in a very brief way, 2 to 3 minutes, just to speak about the role of artificial intelligence in what we are pursuing, particularly in terms of ensuring that we are able to monitor and track on the progress that we are making on adaptation, and how also things are either getting better or worse, again, in response to Jessica's question. Dr. Andisu? Sorry. Just come in the front.
Okay, thank you, Philip, for giving me this opportunity, and Satish for organizing this. So we have a number of computational data science students and master's student and PhD student here. So these days, machine learning, artificial intelligence, big data is becoming critical, and it has been applied in different areas. So my department deals with computational science as well as data science. So both of them, since my research area is related with climate science and atmospheric physics, so we applied. So we took those tools and we apply that for the prediction purpose. For instance, we have done some research on predicting climate. So we can use that, and we can deal with extreme event also. So for instance, flood prediction, rainfall prediction, using both the data science tools and simulation and modeling tools. So these are important inputs that can be used for decision makers. So in our program, we highly use those tools, advanced tools, to make a better prediction. And the results are really amazing. I mean, some of them are hard to believe. And so, and we are trying to learn more and apply these for predicting climate and conducting research on climate science and on extreme events. Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andisu. I think that is the most brief submission that I've ever had from a scientist, but that again has actually clearly pointed us to where our institutions of learning need to wake up and support Africa particularly in advancing its agenda on climate change, which is increasingly becoming complex, multifaceted, and affecting all the sustainable development goals. I want to do a final round in this particular order. I'll start, and I'll only give 2 minutes, so I'll be quite unkind in this round of process. I'll only give 2 minutes. I'll start with Dr. Meseret. Just 2 key issues in your closing submission. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much for the comments given by Dr. Taya. And also, I forgot her name. Thank you for the comments, but for the question, how to engage users in climate issues. We all know that it's very crucial to engage users in climate activities, since users are one of the vulnerable community groups. And also we believe that users can bring solutions because they have innovative ideas and they are also change makers. So in our universities, there is university industry linkage that we are trying to cooperate or to link university students, especially graduate students, with different industries who want to practice what they have learned so far, and also to use their innovative ideas. So these are at the starting initial points. We will accept your comments and we will work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's cross over to Obed.
Thank you, Philip. Yeah. So I think as we talk about models like Flocker, which are really, really working on the ground, on the negotiation side, the gap that I mentioned on adaptation, I think we have a very good opportunity as we talk about the new collective quantified goal. How do we anchor adaptation, finance, and the means of implementation that we're talking about in the NCQG? So I think this is something that we need to also political sort of push in ensuring that we have a sub-goal, a clear sub-goal on adaptation under the NCQG. But of course, we're also pushing for a sub-goal on loss and damage to ensure long-term financing. And this, as we talk about the Africa Regional Forum Sustainable Development, we're also saying that this money, when we talk about climate finance, we should not brand money for ODA as climate finance. So this money needs to be new and additional. So I think this should be clear. I know you gave me 2 minutes. Then we don't need to start from scratch. Even as we're developing these indicators, there's already work that has already been done. Researchers are here. How can you use the evidence? How can we use the work that they are doing? SDGs, they already have the indicators. How can we already ride on what has already been done to really build indicators for GGA that are fit for purpose? How can we ride on? How can we use the Agenda 2063, for instance? How can we learn from what has been done? But in terms of evidence, allow me to say that universities, researchers, one challenge that we are facing when we talk about evidence, we keep saying that there's no evidence, but I know there's evidence, but there's what we call non-disclosure agreements. How do we deal with that? How do we unlock enormous evidence that is available from the research work that has been done? But because you signed, as you're doing your consultancies, you signed a non-disclosure agreement with the person who gave you the consultancy, this data or evidence is still sitting somewhere and is not doing the work that is supposed to be doing to be able to inform. So last but not least, Philip, Africa needs to speak with one voice. Right now, we have a very good opportunity. The chair of G77 is Africa, Uganda. The chair of LDC group is Africa. We have the AGN. How can we ride on that to ensure that we have sort of a strong voice as Africa to be able to push our issues? And lastly, opportunities for engagement. We have workshops. For instance, next week we have the technical expert dialogue on climate finance, talking about NCQG. We have a workshop coming on 1st May on GGA in Bhutan. How do we ride on these opportunities to be able to ensure that the issues that we are talking about here really we inform those processes? Of course, one challenge that we also need to call out is some of these workshops really restrict civil society engagement, and I think that's something that we really need to see how to handle it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Asefa.
Okay, good. I think I do have 3 points. The first one is we need to create our own agenda, and we need to create it based on what we are facing as a continent. So whatever we do, it has to come from ours, not from the developed countries. The second one is localization is the main issue, because if we are not making it to the localization level or to the local level, whatever is happening, whatever is decided, we don't see any change. Regarding finance and technology transfer, we don't have to always ask finance and technology transfer. We have to have our finance, it might be a carbon market. I know in Ethiopia, having a carbon market, the system is really tight. I don't know if it is in another country, but we have to be flexible and work on the carbon market and get our finance and use our own technology as well, because we don't have to ask always technology and finance. The third one is, I think as a youth, we all need to learn from the CSO organization. They need to engage us, the government, everyone needs to engage us, because we need to know the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant submission there. I just want to pass the mic to Charles. Charles, do not use the mic for purposes of war, because I think there was quite a good submission from my dear sister, except the navigation around the carbon space. Just handle her with care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we need to document what works on the ground, particularly on locally led approaches. Because at times we have been assuming that communities are tabula rasa or empty streets where we can write. And those realities, those experiences with the communities can really, really help, in terms of informing GGA, in terms of informing SQG. But most importantly, we must continue pushing GCF. I know we had some very interesting engagement with GCF on Thursday and I think on Wednesday. We must continue pushing, for easing of the protocols and modalities of access of resources that are going to cascade down. But most importantly, also call for establishment of a proper monitoring framework to ensure that we're tracking finance, not just from GCF to countries, but to ensure it is reaching the most vulnerable communities on the ground. Number 2, COP is not an end in itself. In fact, COP is a process. And I like what Obed indicated. We must actually take advantage of a momentum building, avenues that are available and utilize those particular spaces. I know we are within some negotiation, blocks like G77, like he has indicated, and China, but we must also interrogate the sincerity and the honesty of the parties also in some of those particular arrangements. We have had cases where G77 and China arrangement has stood against a common African position, for example. So we must start interrogating even some of the blocks where we are and see how we can be able to influence. I mentioned about the LDCs. In Madrid, I remember in COP25, we had a situation whereby the LDCs were also against a common African position, calling for special circumstances, for Africa. So we must really, of course, interrogate how we engage in those particular spaces. But most importantly, do we have allies beyond Africa? Can we engage in what we call charm offensive in approaching those? Sometimes we think probably are not for opposition and try to win them from our side. And we need to create allies, I think, beyond the continent, as an African continent, as AGN, so that we can be able to rally for common African position, not just as an African thing, but we see something that can also be able to get support from other parties. Thank you.
Thank you, Charles. Over to my brother, Peter.
Great. I can see people are tired, either hungry, but I hope we are not boring you. I will give you 4 takeaways. Number 1, Flocker model seems to be working. Please come and explore. Don't go to University of Cambridge. Don't go to LLA. Please strengthen South-South and see what is working. Because it has got 2 components, what we call the policy and the P4R, program for results. The money is allocated to all government ministries. I can see the researchers are saying, oh, there is no money for research. But in Kenya, under this program, we supported Kenya Meteorological Department until they are the first in Africa under the World Meteorological Department to come up with the national framework for climate services. And now we are under the FLOCA program, they are all in all villages and wards, providing the local communities with early warning system in real life using dashboard like this. I think that one is amazing. I saw it and I said, little money can do bigger things. And in the same, in terms of data, which my colleagues and the learned doctors are saying, artificial intelligence is very key. That alone has unlocked almost 61 million from the IMF Climate Resilience, Sustainable Resilience Fund. That small intervention. Very significant indeed. So a whole government approach is very, very key, where the researchers, the money in a program like FLOCA, which is dedicated to the national policy and institutional support, is given to you in bulk. You just come up with an action plan on what you want to do, professor. If you want to do research, we say, fine. There are a lot of research work that you've done, like what you've said. First of all, let's give those one to the local community because the resources are available. Then when now there is indeed a gap in knowledge, for example, the new instruments for introducing artificial intelligence to aid your research, we support it and we finance it as part of your activity. I think universities, you really need to come and look at that. Then for the people in the ministries, all the 7 sectors of adaptation are allocated very significant funding. Then each counties as subnational are allocated approximately 1.5 million US$ per year for the next 5 years. How many years will you take you to write a proposal of a research to get $1 million long? We need to prioritize things like this. We need to look down on ourselves. As I said, we are on our own. And finally, we also need to support our government to come up with proactive policies. Money follows good, well-designed domestic policies. You cannot work in abeyance. FLOCA finance civil society, and I am very happy, Chairman Medeke, Executive Director, this year alone, and is in the CSO framework, and this year under the FLOCA program, we have allocated you 100 million shillings, and we are going to allocate more through this program. So in summary, locally led adaptation is one in all. No one should be left behind. No one should pull people behind. The youth that always segregate themselves that we are young people, or we want to be this side, or the women that want to be sitting in women groups. Under the locally led adaptation, there is no grouping. We sit together because the decision is made on the table. In all those committees, 30% are women, 30% are youth. That is how many? 60. 30% are people with disability, and then 10% are representing special category group researchers, high-level authorities, a good politician. It is one, and they are sitting, there is nobody young, because climate change does not, flood does not fail to affect you because you are young or because you are old. It comes in like a wind, and the wind carries everything on its road. So the time has reached when we need to sit down together, make decisions together. Segregation must stop. Don't fear an old man. Don't fear whatever. And the youth, I would have, I know time is not, can I see the youth here from those 2 universities? Just to see if the guys we can leave this mantle to. Please, can you just stand up? Don't be shy. Can you just, the students, yes, from those 2 universities, this is a very impressive number because the future is on your hands. The transition to this just is on you, nobody else. So I hope we will get a few also in the next summer school so that when we come back in Ethiopia, can see the summer school team, because FLOCA is supporting almost 100 university students in the next cohort of the summer school. So you are not alone, we are with you, but don't segregate yourself that you are young or you are a youth. Pesa the money for adaptation is available for all. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, Peter. You can actually see the challenge that I had as a moderator, a very powerful panel. And therefore, the challenge of managing and living within time was almost with me. I think the conversation has been widened. That's what I'll basically say. The conversation has been widened. But this dialogue was building from an event where we held an event on the 17th and 18th. And this event was basically looking at pragmatic action to ensure that climate finance reaches a front line. And it is the one that actually consolidated the statement that we've just walked you through. The event was held in collaboration with ACJA, African Coalition for Sustainable Energy. We had the AFDAN, African Designated Authorities Network.
Representing here, there.
And then we had CARE International, which Obed is seated right there. And then we had Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance. Have I forgotten any institution? Which Charles again represents. And hopefully, if we had gotten the information earlier, we could have added these two universities because they are quite an important player within this particular process. We are, as we speak on this is actually our fourth event since we arrived in Addis Ababa. We started with the action that I've just described, then we had another side event, which was actually pursuing accountability for climate finance within the AFRISAD, Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development process. So we had that event. Yesterday, we had high-level political dialogue. Is it high-level political? Sometimes I add political, so remove political so that I'm not killed, but it's high-level dialogue on issues or nexus issues between climate change and health, which we closed yesterday. It was a 2-day process beginning 19th and 20th. Today we have this event, and tomorrow the conversations continue now within the official Africa Regional Forum for Sustainable Development, where we will be having Africa Climate Talks. That is a space that PACJA co-creates with the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, the African Union Commission, and African Development Bank. So some of the recommendations that are coming from this particular flow will also find their space within that conversation. Equally, in this room, beginning our official time, which is 9 sharp, and Eugene, I'm looking at Eugene when I say 9 sharp, just for confirmation that it will be 9 sharp. In this room tomorrow, we will also have another powerful action that is also aimed at accelerating access to energy in Africa. We have over 630 million in darkness. They must walk in light. They must live in light, not in darkness. So we'll be launching that campaign. Quite interesting conversations in terms of how we can actually ensure that we deploy renewable energy in accelerating that. So those are the actions for tomorrow. For the international delegates, we'll provide you with additional guidance on how we will structure the day. At this point, can we put our hands up? Let's put our hands up. Let's try to put our hands up. Let's put the phones down. Let's try to clap. And we have to clap harder. So why have you clapped? First clap for yourself now. Then let's clap to the able panelists who have been able to demystify very complex issues and also provide quite transformative proposition. Let's clap for them. Thank you so much. This brings the event to a closure, and sincere appreciation for your attendance. The conversations are wide open, as you've heard. Thank you. Tea is served outside, so do not forget to grab a cup of tea, coffee. Yeah.
Greetings in the name of His Imperial Majesty. I roots in the rough lands all around me. I feel the new generation. We come again. No, no. I be sad, no, no. It's a dancehall thing. Selassie are the first. Rastafari. Somehow, my follow-gishi. Somehow, animality. Somehow, Antim Batarashi. Somehow, that moment Yazishi. Zare, Kamatashima. Zare, Ibukalshima. Bitsage, Imle Begutino. Yalana, Gamakdaruma. Imata, Yeda, Larasiala, Wimache, Ikara. Bizaga, Yem Pukramada Muno. One now, a girl, Karsuma, Hono, Burbu. Yaunat Masloina Persitino. Zare Matesh, Pekarlan, Exio. Takapal could Pekar and Arkuno. Awal Lord, give me Kamatash, and then it Magatas and Mashi, and the Yangizel, Zarem Danam Odishi. I live there at them, you go yang at them, Kamatash, which I beka. Yes, I will Lomoni, Kalabusi, gang, the Shale Soka she belta. No, give me Kamatashi. Give me Kamatashi. Somehow, as I'm somehow, donuts now been so chapula. Somehow, chapulam jumping on the views. Hello, Kamatash, tell him I. Allen, the nice and villain. Salam, Kasi, resident. Allen, Sinas Catalan. Matalit, villain. Even in Yazan Tintate. I little so me go so then. Metashal, Ali, what does Metashal? When you man you then you want to shoes. Yes, all up in court, let's say, shall I was going to less outside, but then by me, what don't man know the traffic. Rasa agar semangga rival, mata celebem betik itu nau tak ada kesau, mau dari gabal kabit. Bala, kebala, ambil bala, Rastafari mande, mana, kekala, hulung kena matfaldo, ababayos baru, ada betul isikar cingema, bola betul anjingala cuma. Gibi kamatash, nene magata samashi, nene angizeo, zare me diana me wadishi. I live there at them, you go yang at them, kamatash bichai beka. Yes, I will Lomoni, Kalabusi, gang, the Shale Soka she belta. No, give me Kamatashi. Living all the tissue. Give me Kamatashi.